So we're going to make a few additional changes to our storyboard here. And the first change we're going to make is we're going to add a title to our nav bar up here. I said we could do that in our last video, but we didn't actually make that change. So how can we do that? Well, let's select our navigation item in our scene outline here for our view controller. And we can just type in a title in here. We can say Barcelona. The Sagrada La Familia is located in Barcelona, so it makes sense that we put that here. And if you wanted to, let's say we're deploying to the 5S, you might run out of nav bar space. So you could adjust this title if you want. You could just make this like message, and that might shorten it up. Make this button a little bit smaller and give ourselves a little bit more space for our title here. In the 6, it's a wider screen, so we have a little bit more space to work with in our nav bar here. And then what we want to do is we want to practice making an additional image view. And this time we're going to do it in our second view controller. So we're going to add an image view here. And let's just drag this in. Now we don't want this to be the size of our screen here. We want this to be much smaller. So let's go to our size inspector. We notice that we have our image view selected in our view controller scene. And let's set this to 80 by 80. And we don't want this to be hidden by our nav bar, so we can just kind of drag this down, and we'll set this right below our nav bar, and we'll have a little bit of a border here on the right. And we'll be deploying this to the iPhone 6 here, so this is a pretty good width that we can use from our compact view inside of our view storyboard here. So the next thing we want to do is we want to update our image view's image property, and in order to do that we're going to add an additional image. So this time we're going to use Albert Einstein, and I'm going to just go ahead and open up my project navigator here again, and I'm going to select Albert Einstein. I had saved him to my desktop, and we're going to go ahead and just drag him into supporting files. And once again we're going to choose the options that we chose before. We're going to copy items if needed, we're going to create groups, and we're going to definitely make sure we have add to target selected here. So we're going to press finish, and we should now see alberteinstein.jpg added to our supporting files. We can even click on it and it'll show up here. So it's just a stamp. And when we go back to our storyboard here, let's just enlarge Xcode. Let's close out our left pane there. We can go back to the attributes inspector, once again with our image view selected. And let's just make sure our scene is fully open here. Click on these arrows. Let's now select the image for the Albert Einstein stamp. And we now see that this appears. Now, if you want to, feel free to play with the size. I highly encourage you to play in the different size inspectors and the attributes inspectors. You could make this like 100 by 100 if you wanted a bigger stamp, maybe. Definitely okay to resize this stuff, and kind of doing it yourself and playing with it will make this interface a little bit easier to navigate. So the final thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and run our application. It might seem like we're going to be testing this quite a lot in the beginning of the course. Why are we running this simulator so much? I can see this change in the storyboard. But when you're starting out, you want to just constantly be testing. You want to make sure each little change is reflected properly. We see that right now when I'm running in the iPhone 5-6, right, it's a little bit too far to the right? And that's because this compact view isn't a perfect example of the simulator we're going to be using. We'll figure out exactly how we can get things to mirror and make sure that things are properly in the storyboard. But for right now, we can see immediately just by an eye test here that right now our stamp is way too far to the right, so it's getting cut off. If we move it a little bit farther to the left here, let's test this now. And let's go to the message, and we now see that our stamp is properly in there. Maybe that's a little too far to the left, so we can maybe move it 10 points more to the right. So let's put this at 250, and that should work perfectly. I know that it's not a perfect explanation, like why this isn't perfectly the same thing as our iPhone 6. And the real reason is that this has to give us enough space to work with the iPhone 6 Plus, the iPhone 6, the iPhone 5S, and the iPhone 4. So we need a bunch of different spaces to accommodate all these different widths. And once again, we'll figure out how to do all of that in the future, how to make this work in all of these different applications. So for now, you're just going to have to play with it and kind of manually drag things around, manually resize things like we did with our image view before, until we figure out, okay, this is how we size for all of our different devices.